very good morning to you. Emma Raducanu has made history in New York. The 18-year-old from Kent had to come through qualifying just to take part in the US Open, and then she won it without dropping a single set. At her moment of victory, she threw herself to the floor in disbelief. That was before saluting her Canadian opponent, Leylah Fernandez, as a great competitor. The Queen and the Prime Minister have praised her sensational performance, but perhaps the most appropriate tribute came from the Spice Girls. That's girl power right there. Congrats. Now, Emma's friends and supporters gathered to watch the match at her club in Beckenham, and Ivor Bennett joined them for all of the celebrations.
It was an emotional night in Bromley. And this was only the first set.
And now it's time for our champion, Emma Raducanu.
Park Langley Tennis Club is where it all began for Emma Raducanu. No wonder then they're toasting her success.
I had massive belief in her. I've always said that she was, if anyone I coached up until this point, you know, would come through, it would be Emma. No disrespect to anybody else, but she's just always been tough on court. She's as hard as nails, and now she's a Grand Slam champion. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable.
Nails were chewed, nerves were frayed. Even the odd prayer was said. But throughout it all, it seems there was never any doubt. The champagne would indeed be flowing. And when match point number 3 came around, it was almost as if she'd heard their chants.
There is going to be some party in here tonight, and the celebrations will not stop here, because this is a victory not just for Emma Raducanu, her family and her friends, but for the whole of British tennis.
That's because several bedtimes will have been passed last night across the country in the name of inspiring the next generation.
I think it's amazing. It's very inspirational to just see her come to that far. Just seeing her win a Grand Slam, I think it's just amazing.
I mean, this is past your bedtime, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that why you liked it, or did you like watching her win? A bit of both?
A bit of both, yeah.
My first qualifying match, all the way to the final.
To follow in her footsteps will of course mean hard work, but according to her old coach, the secret's to have fun too.
We laughed and giggled all the way through, and sometimes she'd bring her colouring book, so when she was resting we'd sit on the floor and do some colouring, because she was still a little child, you know. We didn't make her push cars up hills or anything like that.
The late night doesn't mean a day off today, in fact far from it. The courts here will be in use all day as the hunt for the next Raducanu begins. Ivor Bennett, Sky News in Bromley.
Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to our sports correspondent, Tom Parmenter. But first, Aisha Zahid is at the Bromley Tennis Centre for us this morning. Aisha, that's got to be a tennis centre that is absolutely brimming with pride.
Absolutely. They're all going to be incredibly proud of Emma here, waiting for her to come back home and bring that trophy home with her as well. It's where it all began for her. She picked up a racket here aged 5 and regularly trained here throughout her school years. Her school's only around the corner, so she was here before school, after school, sometimes even during school hours to fit a bit of extra training in. They've been watching all of her matches here, and last night the place was packed out with people who personally knew her, coaches, as well as members of the club, friends as well, all watching her make history. It's every tennis club's dream, I think, for seeing one of their players reach a professional level, but I don't think anyone quite saw this coming. Only a few weeks ago she was ranked 338th in the world ranking, so it's remarkable to see her become a Grand Slam champion without dropping any sets along the way. And it's going to inspire the next generation of tennis players, especially those members here at this club. I expect the courts will be packed out later today.
All right, we'll be keeping an eye on that, won't we? Let's bring in Tom Parmenter now, who is in Derbyshire for us. Tom, extraordinary match, wasn't it, last night? Just put this into context for us, and it's one of the greatest sporting achievements of all time. It's got to be.
Yeah, and you just don't do this. You do not go from being ranked 150 in the world just a few weeks ago to a Grand Slam winner. But that is precisely what Emma has done. And it is just something that was a joy for those watching last night. Awe-inspiring tennis, scintillating moments. But we've seen many plucky British underdogs over the years, haven't we, who have put British tennis fans through the mill. Well, this was nothing of the sort. It felt like you were watching one of the great rivalries of sport, an established head-to-head with Leylah Fernandez. But both of them, new names, producing a next fascinating decade ahead with those two and others coming into the mix. But Emma Raducanu very much has that next decade at her disposal. And millions of British tennis fans tuned in last night because, of course, it was hastily made free to air during the course of yesterday. And what a decision that was, because millions of people spent their Saturday night just loving the tennis, the drama, the clinical nature of just how Emma Raducanu makes her shots and finds the very corners of that court. It was an extraordinary performance from an 18-year-old who at the start of the year was just wondering, like pretty much every other British teenager, whether her exams would be taking place. But she didn't drop a set through 10 games at the US Open, the first qualifier to win a major Grand Slam title. And she is, of course, enjoying the moment, trying to take it all in, enjoying the adulation, the prize money that comes with it. But she can do all sorts of things inside and outside tennis now, given that victory last night. And we've seen, of course, through this year, so many teenage breakout sports stories, new faces coming to the fore. But I think what Emma Raducanu did in New York last night just about tops them all.
Oh, doesn't it just? All right, Tom, thank you. Now we'll show you Martha Kellner's interview with the lady herself, Emma Raducanu, in full at 7:30. Now, in other news, the government is to repeal many of the special powers that it took to restrict people's freedom during lockdown. The Prime Minister is expected to make a statement this week on the government's plan for managing COVID in the autumn and the winter. Well, Boris Johnson will say that vaccines will continue to be the first line of defence in the fight against the virus. The Independent Joint Committee on Vaccinations and Immunisation is expected to offer guidance this week on who will receive booster jabs, some as early as this month. And powers that the government took to impose restrictions on events, close or restrict access to schools and detain people who are infectious will be repealed. Well, we can speak more about some of those plans with the Deputy Chief Executive of NHS Providers, Saffron Corday. Good morning to you. I want to start by talking to you about the situation with case numbers, but particularly hospitalisations. If daily admissions keep on at this rate, I've read one estimate that has said that the NHS would become overwhelmed by November. Is that right?
I think what we are seeing now is a steady rise in cases. It's different to the last waves of COVID that we have seen because we have got the interaction between the vaccine and the number of hospitalisations. So the vaccine is certainly effective in reducing the number of hospitalisations and reducing severe and death. But we have to remember that case numbers are going up and the numbers of people in hospitals and requiring ventilators is also going up. And the important thing to remember here is that what it does is mean that hospitals then have to focus almost exclusively on treating COVID patients rather than dealing with that big backlog of care that we've got, which has arisen before the pandemic, but also during the pandemic.
And if hospitalisations do continue at the rate that we've been seeing, at what point does the NHS run out of capacity?
I think it's impossible to tell that at the moment. I think, you know, we saw last winter, didn't we, the NHS under incredible, huge strain. I think it's fair to say that the NHS keeps going no matter what. And, you know, the very welcome injection of funding last week for the NHS will give it a real boost in terms of building capacity to help us over these winter months and beyond. But it's fair to say that we have to keep all of this in balance between trying to tackle the backlog and also think about how to treat people with COVID. And so preventing transmission is absolutely key here. It's also worth saying, though, that we are already seeing up and down the country hospital trusts who are already cancelling routine operations. So the very thing we are needing to focus on, which is getting that backlog down, they are already having to cancel operations because of the number of COVID patients in hospital. But it's impossible to answer your question at the moment. I think it really depends how it pans out.
I've been reading some reports that suggest that the flu season could be worse, perhaps, this winter because people haven't been mixing as much and therefore it could just be more virulent. How prepared is the NHS for the winter? And if you could answer that with particular reference to staff shortages that you've been seeing.
Yeah, so the NHS anticipates winter every year. It's one of the core elements of understanding demand and flow of patients. So the NHS is preparing itself for winter and the additional pressures that will come with that. As you talked about, flu, immunity is particularly low this year because of all of the protective measures we've put in place for COVID. There's also RSV, which is a particularly virulent strain of respiratory illness that affects children, which we are seeing emerging. So that is challenging. And alongside that, we have got staffing pressures. We've got a workforce that is incredibly tired. I can't stress this enough. They've been going full pelt for the last 18 months. And we have to remember that whatever goes on in the community, so rising COVID cases, even with a workforce that has been double vaccinated, they are still susceptible to COVID, just perhaps not as severe, but that means that they do need to then isolate or they are too unwell to work. So we are in a situation where the workforce is challenged and we will have difficulties staffing over winter. That is one of the challenges we have every year, and there's no reason to think that that's going to go away and will probably be even more challenging.
And with the funding package which has been announced, how far does that take you in being able to address the backlog? And we've heard the horror stories that, that waiting list could go up to 13 million without the extra funding. How far does it take you?
Yeah, well, the Secretary of State himself said could go up to 13 million. I think the first thing to say is from the NHS perspective, it's an incredibly welcome injection of cash, but it is just a start. And we need to really look at how that will pan out with COVID, because it's this interaction, as I keep saying, between COVID cases and getting through the backlog of care. So if COVID cases rise, if there is a new variant of COVID, we're living with the Delta variant, which is particularly transmissible. We could get a new variant. It's perfectly possible. And if that has different characteristics or different facets, it means that we need to focus on treating COVID patients alongside the backlog of care. I think it's going to take us until at least the end of this Parliament, so over the next 3 years, to start to make some real inroads. But that injection of support, financial support for the NHS and also for social care is incredibly welcome, but it is the start rather than the end of the story, and that's what we have to remember.
OK, well, good to talk to you this morning. Saffron Caudry, thank you. Well, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, will be joining my colleague Trevor Phillips this morning from 8:30 on Trevor Phillips on Sunday. Now, leading trainers across the country are opening their stable doors to the public for the first time ever in celebration of National Racehorse Week. The initiative is intended to help the industry recover from COVID and the scandal caused by a trainer who was pictured sitting on a dead horse. Well, that shocking image is included, I should say, in Enda Brady's report.
This is British horse racing at its absolute best. Thoroughbreds on the gallops in Gloucestershire, with the men and women who care for them 24/7. The idea for a national week to celebrate the racehorse was the brainchild of trainer Richard Phillips.
The typical life of a racehorse is one that should be, copied by human beings in many respects. They have a great, healthy life, they have a healthy diet, they have medical care to die for, 24-hour care, and all these basic messages should be good across to the public, because, very funny, racing is a great industry and so many good people look after so many good horses, and it's a celebration of the racehorse, really.
It's a scene that is repeated every morning in every county in the country. Racing was hit hard by the pandemic. Then there was the damage done by this image of Irish trainer Gordon Elliott. He returns next week after serving a 6-month suspension for sitting on a dead racehorse. Across England, Scotland and Wales, 140 trainers will open their stables to the public so they can visit and see for themselves how well the horses are cared for.
I just love everything the animals give to us as human beings. They're very special animals. What I get from horses, I think a lot of people get from dogs and just standard pets at home. I think they're amazing animals. They're just machines, really. I mean, they're so powerful. They've got so much personality, and every racehorse is different, and what I love is that every racehorse is loved by somebody.
Grace Muir founded the Heroes charity near Wantage in Oxfordshire 15 years ago to rehome and retrain racehorses. She gives them a second career and offers young people from all backgrounds the chance to work with them.
I saw there was a use for these horses after the racing days are over. In those days, which probably is about 30 years ago, there wasn't so many to deal with, let's put it that way. But I came up with this idea of retraining them to do another job, because the breed is so versatile and the horses are so intelligent and so quick to learn another skill.
The original plan was to have National Racehorse Day, but it was so well received by the public, a day has been extended to a week.
So the hope is that National Racehorse Week becomes an annual fixture in the calendar to showcase everything that is good about British horse racing.
The sport and the industry has much to be proud of. Those who work in it feel a celebration of the racehorse is long overdue. Enda Brady, Sky News in Gloucestershire.
Now, the COVID pandemic has exposed the difference in quality of healthcare that's experienced by different parts of society. And now a new project aims to document the experience of some of those providing care. The Black Frontline is the largest oral history project featuring Black nurses and doctors from around the world, with 300 stories being captured. Well, I'm joined now by Esther Armagh, who's the Executive Director of the Armagh Institute of Emotional Justice and also the founder of the Black Frontline project. Good to see you this morning, Esther. Thank you for coming on Sky News. I know that you're bringing together Black Frontline workers to share stories and to raise awareness. What are some of the common themes that you're seeking to illuminate?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. So the Black Frontline is a project co-directed by myself, Esther Armagh, and Dr. Kim Gallen of COVID Black. And we're currently gathering 100 stories from the UK from Black doctors and nurses. It is powerful, devastating, illuminating, and deeply sobering to listen to Black nurses and Black doctors talk about their fear, the challenges they faced, the unrelenting loss from seeing people die, feeling both terrified by what they confronted, by the unknown, but then also the amazing communal coming together, focusing in, head down, just trying to do the very best they can with the tools that they had to get through. The backdrop of that, of course, is the longstanding inequity, the institutional racism that exists, and how that impacts, shapes, and determines so much of what is happening. And so this project is about saying their stories need to be centered in order to explore how we strategize to make structural change in healthcare in the UK. The stories are also from across the US and in Ghana in West Africa.
Yeah, so it's a big undertaking, and there have been various inquiries as well, haven't there, into the disproportionate impact on people of colour, particularly those on the front line because of COVID. What have they told us, if anything?
So our project focuses specifically on Black doctors and nurses. And what they're sharing with us is, on the one hand, the power of community to engage and stand together. But on the other hand, the isolation that comes from the kind of long-standing inequities that puts them on the front line without the kind of protection, and I don't just mean PPE, but the kinds of structural protections that healthcare should offer all of us. And so this project, which is globally led, we have a wonderful team in the UK, a team in the US, and a team here in Ghana who will gathering the stories. And part of the focus and the work and the aim is for us, storytelling is our strategy to make structural change. And what we saw was an opportunity by gathering these stories of having Black nurses and Black doctors be not just on the front line in terms of endangering their lives, but in making the kind of change for the future healthcare that we all deserve, that their voices should be centered in that. And that's part of this, what project does. It's a multi-year project. This is year one, gathering those stories that will be available publicly. Different from other oral histories, it will be publicly available anywhere in the world on the Black Frontline website. And I'll also be doing events, panels, discussions, and then doing curricula. The curricula is all about shaping the healthcare of the future and really looking and saying that Black nurses and Black doctors deserve better. Structural racism is a cancer that actually kills all of us. And it needs not just to be eliminated individually, which is too often how it's defined, but for there to be the structural change so that healthcare is a lifeline and doesn't become a death sentence for anybody because of inequity or racism.
Yeah, you're building up a huge body of evidence there. Are you able to see already any specific changes that you think could be easily implemented to help?
One really important one, and I think it's a long-standing issue that has actually been highlighted again and again and again, is how having so many Black nurses and doctors right on the front line and too few in places of power and leadership means that you do not have a representation of the experience, the lived experience of what it means to confront prejudice, to confront bigotry. You don't have that lived experience in leadership spaces, transforming the experience across the board. Too often, the way that we come to racism is we imagine and we think that it's about Black people, it should be solved by Black people, and it's their issue. And actually, it is a societal issue. And so what Black nurses and Black doctors are starting to share, because all of the 300 doctors and nurses get asked the same 8 questions intentionally, so we can do comparative analysis, and that it's oral. So we want to hear all the accents, the beauty, what I call the sonic Blackness of all these doctors and nurses on the front line. And so what they're sharing is that they are offering their ideas for what change looks like. And then the work is to institutionalize those. So it no longer is isolated voices calling for individual change, but this body of work galvanizing, organizing, strategizing to say that there can't be a back to pre-COVID reality. The future has to be changed and determined by those who've been on the front line, who've literally faced COVID eye to eye and still delivered top quality healthcare. We know they deserve better, but it can't be platitudes and just talk. It's got to manifest in making the structural change that would make their jobs safer and their lives better and those of their families, and therefore all of society all across the UK. We're actually still gathering the stories of Black doctors and nurses right now. So if you're somebody who's watching and would like to contribute or would like to participate, you can absolutely do that. You can just go to social media. You can DM us on Twitter @The Black Frontline, just take out the A and the C, or you can email us, theblackfrontline@gmail.com, either one.
It'll be absolutely fascinating to see what comes out of that. Really good to talk to you this morning, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's coming up 7:45 and we're going to have a look at this morning's papers with the broadcaster Anne Diamond and the editor of the Sunday Express, Michael Booker. Stay with us. Michael Booker, I want to introduce him to you because he's the editor responsible for the truly dreadful puns on the front page of the Daily Express. But it is the biggest story in town, isn't it? Absolutely immense. Michael.
Well, yes, you two may be internationally known TV journalists and celebrities, whereas I have made up a word today which will be in the dictionary next year, mark my words. But yeah, no, I think I got a little bit excited last night, and we all did, I think, watching Emma Raducanu in the US Open. And, it's a fantastic picture of her at the moment. She realised what she'd done at just 18 years old, and it was a fantastic final, watching it against Leila Fernandez. And as you said in the last hour, they look as though they will have some rivalry going forward, because there was some pictures knocking around yesterday of them a few years ago at Wimbledon, knocking up, and here they are now. Big celebrities, big sports stars, and you can see with Leila, actually, she had the look in her eye, I'm going to get you back. So it's all good. They're both really fantastic sporting stars, and the country got behind her. The Queen hailed it last night straight away. Boris Johnson, the Duchess of Cambridge, everyone got caught up with it, and you can see the newspapers did as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking there about those classic rivalries we might see going on over the years. The lovely thing about it, Anne, as well, is that everybody got behind Emma, didn't they? But we shouldn't forget, her opponent was tremendous.
She was, and only barely a year older than Emma herself. No, she's one to watch as well. And as Mick says there, I reckon that rivalry will play out maybe in many more finals. And we're just going to have to buy Mick a book of words that begin with M, like empower, and emotional. There's lots of words that begin with M to suit every occasion, and we're going to need it in the next few years, I reckon.
Yeah, I think she's giving you a bit of shade there about your wordsmithing, Mick, but we'll move on. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph, talking about an internal government report on an impact assessment report, essentially, on Boris Johnson's national insurance hike.
Yeah, it's bad news, really, for Boris Johnson if he was hoping to get his Tory MPs who had been rumbling and grumbling last week about the social care hike on national insurance, because this Inland Revenue report that has gone into the Treasury. This was available around last week, but the MPs didn't see it before they voted on it. And what it's saying is that this hike will hit the just about managing. Now, that's the part of the country where we heard, I think, of them under Theresa May's government. Those people who, at the end of each week, each month, they've paid their bills and they haven't got much left to spend on any luxuries or anything else for that matter. And it says that this report is saying that it will have a harmful effect on people in those sort of families, and it will affect. It could affect family breakdowns as well. It could also affect wealth creation and stop businesses decided to invest as well as part of this report. So it's gloomy reading for the Prime Minister, gloomy reading for those Red Wall MPs as well, who they say they've been taking the temperature of their constituency, and they say that there's a rebellion growing there amongst voters who, after all, have only lent their vote to the Tories at the moment to see if they can be trusted. And in one focus group, they did say it was the poll tax 2.0. That's not just a headline come up from with the Telegraph. That's actual voters saying it. And if you look
we
at
know
the
what that did for Margaret Thatcher, don't we?
Well, exactly. And if you look at the leader in the Telegraph today, it's just one big long leader saying that the Tories have to scrap this plan entirely.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's go through a bit of a gear change here, Anne. We want to talk about a new trend for bridal bouquets.
Yes, if you are a bride-to-be, you can go green by actually going brown. And I'm not sure this is going to catch on.
But dead flowers, basically.
Yes, it's for your bouquet. Basically, we're coming into autumn, and Shane Connolly, who's done lots of royal weddings, says that engaged couples are favouring in-season alternatives over brightly coloured imported flowers and everything. So he's saying that, even twigs, even twigs and brown leaves can make a very attractive bouquet.
Well, I suppose if you're an autumnal bride, I suppose it goes with the flow, doesn't it, a little bit? I had a Google to see whether it was actually a thing, and you can see a huge variety of bouquets with browns and oranges. So yeah, it is a thing apparently. Another thing that's a thing, Michael, apparently, is £12,000 sofas for dogs. What a time to be alive, hey?
Well, yeah. When I owned a dog a few years ago, you can sometimes be caught by madness and start buying them all sorts of expensive rubbish. Now, I think I would have stopped at this. This is the £12,000 settee that's been designed by Christopher Howe. Now, there's pictured in the mail there. Now, those dogs are sat on it. They have no idea that that is a luxurious couch. So they just sit like that, looking like dogs do, dozily into the middle distance, wondering what the heck is going on. You could stick them on a poof and they'd be happy. That's what they do. They just rub themselves on things, and that's what you don't want a £12,000 sofa in your house.
What did you just say? They rub themselves on things. This is the breakfast programme.
They leave smells everywhere. You don't want that on a £12,000 sofa, do you? Just give them a rug and they'll be happy to chew it.
Oh, let's bring you in here, Anne. I can see you want to jump in there. I also want to point out the insightful analysis from an expert that says dogs don't really care what they sit on as long as it's comfortable and ideally has sides.
Dogs don't, but you do, because if you value your dog and their place in your living room, then you want their chair to look nice, don't you? It needs to be part of your whole thing. I've actually found myself looking at a chaise longue for my little dog at a cost of only just under £1,000. So I can understand somebody with far too much money and maybe a lot of taste going as far as 12 grand.
Well, there you go. There you go. Thank you very much, both of you. It's been great having you on the programme.